All right, hello, beautiful humans, and welcome back to another conversation at the Bitcoin Stoa. As a reminder, this is a community-funded project, so if you enjoy listening, you can support the project and our work by sending some sats to the QR code on our website at bitcoinstoa.com. You can also stream sats using a Bitcoin wallet that has a podcast feature. I use the Breeze wallet at the moment, and I find it to be a really awesome experience, and I'm also experimenting right now with Fountain as a podcast app that has a Bitcoin wallet. Current Moscow time, 25:42 at 7:33, 814. And with that said, it's my honor to welcome a human who goes by the name Zero Fee Routing on Twitter to the Stoa today to have a conversation about his experience running one of the biggest Lightning nodes on the Lightning Network today. So ZFR, thanks for being here and welcome to the Stoa.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah, excited to learn from you and sort of share what you know with the community. And you're a humble person because you mentioned right out the gate on Twitter when we were talking about scheduling this that you're not a Lightning expert. You just know enough to not shoot yourself in the foot. And my take is that you don't become one of the world's top routing nodes without being an expert in my mind. So I think Bitcoiners are very humble, but I think you know a lot, and we appreciate you sharing it. So I kind of came across you on my feed, and I couldn't help but be curious to learn about what it takes to run not only an effective Lightning node or a profitable Lightning node, but one of the world's top Lightning nodes. So I want to get into all that, but before we get into Lightning, I'd love to start by hearing your Bitcoin story. When and how Bitcoin came across your life path, and maybe a few of the more significant moments leading up to where we are today.
Yeah. Like most Bitcoiners, I started out as a gold bug. Was like in 2008 something. I stumbled across Ron Paul, his "And the Fed" book, and it became clear to me that fiat money was just not working at all for anybody. So then went down the gold, we should live on a gold standard path. And then came across Bitcoin a couple of years after that. And
when would this have been around?
11.
2011.
So,
okay, cool.
Yeah, so early. And when I heard about it, I had the same reaction as pretty much everybody. How can this work? Can this work at all? I've had the good fortune to already be on the side of we need to replace fiat currency. So I was good there. I had the economic understanding how it could work. And when I read the white paper, I didn't get it all, but I got that it sounded reasonable, and if it worked, it's gonna work big time. And I told everybody I knew and their daughters and their mothers and their dogs they should get Bitcoin because this is gonna be it. I stopped doing that a couple of years later just because I didn't want to shill my own backs that hard. And usually if conversations go that way, I engage, but I don't steer conversations that way. So if you've had me a couple of years back, whatever the topic is, I would steer it towards kind of not doing that anymore.
I think everyone goes through that phase. I went through the same one. Every family dinner, I found a way to bring Bitcoin up, and I was known as just the annoying family member that wouldn't stop talking about this internet money that no one seemed to care much about. And I think everyone goes through that. I think a lot of Bitcoiners go through that phase where it's like this amazing excitement that there's an alternative system that solves problems that everyone has, and they might not even realize. But I don't know about you, but I came to the realization that by only talking about Bitcoin to people who have expressed curiosity to learn about it, letting them bring it up first, I think that is actually the most effective way to orange pill, because when you force it on people, they put up resistance. Whereas if you if you maybe embed some really subtle touch points to make sure Bitcoin's at least on their radar, but then let their own
Yeah,
curiosity bring them forward. I think that's
yeah,
the path. So sounds like you
yeah.
learned that.
That's what I grew to doing. I was very different in the beginning, like forcing it down everybody's throat. But now I'm like, if somebody brings it up, I drop hints here and there, just not about Bitcoin directly, but about how negative interest rates are just lunatic.
Yeah, they're
So yeah,
ridiculous.
yeah,
What
yeah,
got you into
exactly.
gold? Out of curiosity, because you said you were a gold bug, and to me, the journey to understand Bitcoin is really the journey to understand money. And so, if you came to view
Yeah,
gold, the gold standard, or just gold as a superior form of money than fiat, like when did that? What inspired that? Because to me, that's actually the start of your Bitcoin learning journey. Is when you started
yeah,
to
it is.
learn how shitty fiat is. So, what inspired that?
When I realized how fiat money worked, like it's essentially just being created out of thin air by central banks that then charge interest for it, which well, they did charge interest for it, and they don't anymore. But like the on day one, there isn't enough money in the society in the economy to pay back all the money that is owed, because like from day one you owe more money than there is, and that was just so mind-blowingly wrong to me, uh, that yeah, that got me started in the whole we need a money that is not an obligation, not a debt, but an asset, basically. So uh, fiat money is just somebody else's promise to pay you back, and gold as money and Bitcoin as money, it's just an asset that you hold with without having to rely on anybody else, basically.
Yeah, and the unmanipulatability of it, like the fact
Yeah,
that like I kind of every experience I have talking about Bitcoin to people, especially people who are completely new to it, gives me some insights. I remember one of the recent insights I had was this whole notion that I'm starting to mention that it's capped at 21 million units,
yeah,
just to see what people's reaction is. And the past couple interactions I've had are people that resonates with people, right? The scarcity element fundamentally resonates with people where they're like, oh, there's only ever going to be that amount. Okay, well then
yeah,
it's got to be worth something if people are using it. And
exactly.
yeah, I just always find it so interesting that people know so little about the fundamental bedrock that our society is built on, which is money. And
Because it's
that
never
is
been brought up.
never been
It's
brought
just
up.
not.
It's often really uncomfortable also, right? When you do decide to lean into the process of understanding money and you start to learn these things, like exactly what you said, where it's created out of thin air, no one actually is creating value. They're just creating these digital units, and they're doing it at whatever whim of a small group of people who seem to think that they
Yeah,
can just make a change, civilization-wide change, and it won't have second, third, fourth order consequences that they have
yeah,
predicted. Like it's so ridiculous. Just the notion that that's being done. I
yeah.
think a lot of people, even if they want to
Exactly.
learn about it, start to feel like, ooh, I'm getting a bit uncomfortable because I'm realizing how fucked up this is.
This can't be true. But well, my first idea was when I heard how it worked. I was also, and I studied economics, so I should have known this. Um, my first reaction was like, that can't be true. And then I looked it
Right.
up and I said, oh yeah, it is true.
Yeah, it's so absurd.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
let's talk about Lightning. So
yeah,
I guess you started to, Bitcoin emerged on your radar in 2011. You went through the
yeah.
process of understanding it. How deep into your Bitcoin journey, like approximately how many years into it did you start? Well, I guess when did Lightning come out and when did you start to learn about Lightning?
Yeah, right. But basically, right about the user-activated soft fork phase in 2017, because that was what was needed to be able to do Lightning transactions,
Okay, interesting.
to get Lightning. So that's when Lightning came up on my radar in 2017, um, as something that is really interesting, fascinating, and cool, but I've never. I started up a Lightning node when BTC Pay Server came out,
Okay.
which was, I don't know, 2018, I guess, 2019 maybe. Um, and I ran Lightning node inside that BTC Pay server setup, but never did much with it. So it was just sitting around. I had a couple of channels, and that's basically all that there was. And I decided to look at Lightning again sometime last year when I was like, okay, I think it's the space has matured. There's payments actually succeed now, which wasn't guaranteed back then. And it's large enough to actually facilitate payments. You can buy vouchers at Bitrefill. You can actually do payments. And when that whole El Salvador thing, them basically running off Lightning, not of the Bitcoin on-chain, but Lightning, I was like, okay, I think this is gonna take off big time. And I think I'm not the only one that realized, okay, this has real merit.
Yeah, and it seems like we're going through like a vertical trajectory in adoption. You start to see big exchanges like Kraken, you have Cash App adopting Lightning as this, the layer 2 application adoption of Lightning and the speed at which it's happening, and also the speed at which the network's growing in places that have a legitimate need for Lightning, like places in Africa where and maybe just to rewind, if someone comes up to you, they believe in Bitcoin, they own sats as a store of value, and have sort of they've heard the word Lightning, but know very little about it. How do you explain Lightning in simple terms that someone who is curious, so they have the curiosity, they want to learn about it. How do you explain Lightning in the context of someone who superficially understands Bitcoin enough to own Bitcoin, but not super deeply? Like what's your noob explanation of Lightning? I'm always curious to hear those.
I try to go with, okay, let's imagine you have person A, B, and C, and person A and B decide to put up a pot of money on the middle of the table, and then just decide and agree upon how that money is divided between them, those two. And then you have the third person C, which has another pot of money with person B, which does the same thing. So, and if you want to pay person B directly, you can just do it, and you just agree upon the new division of the money on the table. And the main feature of Lightning is if A and C want to make a transaction and they don't have a pot sitting between them already, they can use the pot that each of them has with B to move the money around. And I kind of bring up Habala. I don't know if you know about it. It's like I think it's Arabic way of transferring money around the globe. Basically, it's trusted, but you basically give money to person A, and that those person has a ledger with person B in Iraq, and person B in Iraq has a ledger with person C in Afghanistan, and person C in Afghanistan has a ledger with person D in Kabul, and that's how the money moves from, I don't know, New York to Kabul in a couple of days. Trusted, but it moves there without being actually moved. So it's not like the physical money is being handed down. It's just like person A calls person B and says, I want to transfer $100. Let's just agree on the new state of our ledger between us. So it's basically exactly how Lightning works.
Interesting. Yeah. And so in that case, in the ABC case, if person C wanted to send person A a payment, they would route it through person B. Would that be correct terminology?
Yeah, exactly. So the pot between C and B is being shifted towards B for the exact amount, and person B moves the money in that pot from B to A.
Yeah. Gotcha. And so each vector, each pot, I guess, in the middle of two people, would be what we call a payment channel, right? It's a vector between two
exactly. That's basically what a payment channel is. Yeah.
Okay. And then out of personal curiosity, do you consider a payment channel to be a smart contract? Like, would that fit? Like I hear the word smart contract thrown around a lot. I don't freaking understand it. But to me, it seems like it is an agreement, a hard-coded agreement that executes based on a command and not on the desires of individuals. And to me, a payment channel fits into that framework of what a smart contract would be, because you're essentially creating an agreement between two people with constraints saying that if you try and screw me, or if I try and screw you, X thing happens, like the channel closes and funds are distributed. So what are your thoughts on a payment channel being a smart contract?
Yeah, yeah. I would argue is payment channel by itself is not a smart contract. It's just a multi-sig address where there's a 2 of 2 multi-sig where each participant in the channel has the possibility to publish a already signed transaction by all parties to move the funds. A smart contract, a lightning payment is a smart contract. So
Okay.
a lightning payment is like, I want the money to arrive at A, but if that doesn't work, it all falls back to me. And that's the smartness of the contract, basically, that the payment only succeeds if it arrives at the destination.
Understood. Okay. Yeah, that makes things clear in my brain. Another question I had for you was, did you when did you spin up a Bitcoin node? And did you do the Lightning node and the Bitcoin node at the same time, or did you do a Bitcoin node first and then a Lightning node? Like, were they at the same time, or were they spaced out in terms of
No,
time?
I my first Bitcoin node was when I think they just stopped mining when you started it. So my first Bitcoin node was the original Bitcoin node GUI where you started it. And had you started it like a half year earlier, it would have mined on the
Okay.
CPU.
Oh shit! So you're like a legit OG in Bitcoin. I love this.
No, I don't consider myself that way because I am past. When I arrived, Satoshi was gone for a couple months already. So I've never had a conversation with him. That's my limit for being an OG.
Okay, that's a high ass standard for being an OG. Maybe I have to recalibrate my OG definition. Um, yeah. So, and then when you did, so that first node, I guess, was that just downloading literally Bitcoin Core on a
Yeah,
device, or what equipment did you use?
I used my desktop computer to start up Bitcoin. Took forever to think. I would, back then I did kind of understand what was happening, but I didn't quite get it.
Right.
And forever being a couple of hours,
Okay.
because back then it wasn't that huge. Um, but then I just bought some coins and got started, basically.
Cool. And then you said a year ago you started to get more interested in Lightning, and so you know consider the start of your interest as the beginning of your Lightning journey. Like,
Yeah,
um, how has that journey unfolded? Like, and here are examples of sort of some of the things I'm curious about. Is like, okay, you got interested in it. What was your learning practice like? What was the process in terms of like creating a Lightning node? Where did you learn how to do that? What was this? Like, did you have certain resources that were really powerful, or did you just do a self-directed learning process online and sort of gradually piece together the pieces that you needed to know in order to run a Lightning node, and actually not just run a Lightning node? Because, like, this podcast, we do value for value podcasting. It's a community funded platform. So, I spun up, what I would consider the most not most common, but like the most basic node, right? Raspberry Pi, fire up Umbrel, get a
yeah,
Lightning node, enable the value for value payments to come in, but very little functionality. I have very little understanding, although it's something I plan to have like more of a regular practice of learning about Lightning, because I really, same as you, it's like now that's my point zero, where it's like, okay, I want to start to learn more
yeah.
about this, how channels work, and just literally engage with it. What was your Lightning journey like, and is there anything you can give to someone who is now just starting their Lightning journey in terms of tips and learning and resources, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I started. I heard about Umbrel. I downloaded it. I got the hardware and just installed it. Then I read about Raspberry Then I bought the second set of hardware, just installed Raspberry on a second device, and that's when how I it started. That was basically day zero. And
Okay.
then I decided, okay, I think I want to do a routing node, which Umbrel and Rustplets are capable of doing routing transactions, but the hardware is just not made for doing a lot of routing.
And how would you define a routing
So
node? How do you define routing?
a routing node is basically just a node that has the capability to route. So public channels is basically all that you need for routing capabilities. But depending on how professionalized you want to do it, just opening a handful of channels and then going away is not enough. That's something I learned.
Right. Right. It requires energy.
Tons of energy, and it's a constant learning process. So this is what I started with, and then I, probably like everybody else, I decided, okay, I want to earn money routing, and then I opened a bunch of channels to nodes, got some inbound, and then I realized, okay, this is actually, yeah, you can earn some sats routing, but it's to the tunes of a couple of hundred, maybe a couple of thousand sats a day, if you're lucky. So you basically, if you're good, you're making the money back that you're wasting on electricity running.
Yeah, you're making a couple bucks a day, maybe.
Yeah, so it really, it's not, you're not gonna buy a Lambo with it anytime soon. So that was when I realized, okay, maybe charging fees is not the way to do it, especially if I considered myself pretty late to the game. And there was a whole bunch of big routing nodes, very successful big routing nodes and to be a big successful routing node, you need to attract inbound capacity, other people's opening channels to you. No matter how much Bitcoin you have, if nobody opens a channel to you, you're not going to route anything, because for routing, it takes channels on where you can receive and channels where you can send.
So just for my brain to wrap my head around is, when you say inbound, that means someone is opening a channel with you. And the more channels you have opened with peers, the bigger your routing network that you're creating and the more paths you can create for someone trying to broadcast. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yeah, and it basically rises exponentially. So if you have 3 channels, there's 3 different peers you can, or a couple of routes that you allow, and the more channels you have, the more direct routes you make possible.
Gotcha.
And the more transactions you're actually seeing. And so for me, it was like, okay, I'm not going to make any money routing anytime soon anyways. Might as well route for free. That was my first thought, with the positive effect of routing for free attracting inbound, because if I route for free, everybody wants to have a channel with me, right? And also another thing that led me to that conclusion was that the actual routing is not incurring any costs, because
so it's free for you to route.
Exactly. It doesn't cost me anything to move a payment. It costs me a fixed amount of money per time to run the node. But if I route something or if I don't route something, it doesn't make a difference on my cost basis.
Okay.
So
so how are you making money then if you're not charging? And maybe this is a good place to get into the next topic of, like, I've heard you say on a podcast that you're selling liquidity. So can you maybe start with a high level, like a zoomed out description, fairly basic, for what is the difference between routing and selling liquidity, and what does selling liquidity even mean? Like, what's the differentiation between those two? To the uninitiated, what the hell does selling liquidity mean?
Yeah, which is a good question. So the easiest to describe it is, if you have a shop selling mugs and you don't have any Bitcoin yet, but you want to earn Bitcoin, especially you want to earn Bitcoin via Lightning, you need somebody to be able to pay you. And even if you have Bitcoin, if you open the channel to one of the big nodes, that would mean you can pay the other side, but you can't receive any funds over that channel because all you have is outbound liquidity. So you can send money, but you can't receive money back unless you've already sent money out. So then you can receive that amount of money back in the channel. That's how a channel works. You just divide the pot, but you start with the pot being all yours. So, and when in that pot there is no money on the other side, they can't send you money. So if you want to receive funds over the Lightning Network, you need somebody to open a channel to you. That can be achieved by just asking. Some people just open channels to you by asking, or there's swaps where you can just agree with two other people and everybody opens to each other in basically like a triangle constellation or something, which gets you inbound. Or you can just pay someone like Alan Big, or I think Bitrefill does it too, or me basically, to open a channel to you that you can then draw liquidity from towards you.
Gotcha. Okay. So liquidity is the ability to move Bitcoin, basically. And, you know, like when I look at receive, okay. When I look at a payment channel, I almost look at it like an abacus, right? Like you have this wooden dowel that you've connected to another person. The size of that channel is basically the amount of like little pieces on that wooden dowel of the abacus, which you can move back and forth, but the size of the channel determines how many pieces are on the abacus, and it can't move beyond that.
Exactly.
So if you have Bitcoin, you know, you can't send or receive that if you haven't connected that wooden dowel to someone else. But once you have, if opening a channel with someone, when you open a channel with someone else, say you find Ellen Big or Async, like a big node, you open a channel with them and you have half a Bitcoin. What does that enable? Because it sounds like that only enables you to send Bitcoin out, but not receive any Bitcoin. So can you clarify that a little and simplify it a little?
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. If you have, like, you've started up your Umbrel and you use 0.1 Bitcoin, like 10 million sats, open a channel to Async, which is a great peer to open to if you just have a handful of channels. You're able to send almost all of those 10 million sats out into the network, basically, but you can't receive any, because on that abacus, all the little pieces of it are on your end. Gotcha. So in order to receive, being able to receive, you need to send some out first, which is okay. You can basically go to Bitrefill, purchase an Amazon voucher, and boom, you're able to receive funds in that channel again. But if
that
you
makes
want
it clear.
Receive,
and then if you want to receive, like the inverse has to happen, where someone opens a channel with me, and all of the little pieces on the abacus are now on their end able to move towards my direction. So in order to send Bitcoin, you open a channel with someone else. In order to receive it, someone else has to open a channel with you. Would that be correct?
Yes. Basically, unless you open the channel to somebody else and send some sats out for whatever else use.
Okay. So the idea of selling liquidity is essentially you offering, someone can buy, someone can pay you to open a channel with them such that they become able to receive sats. Would that be correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Exactly. And with me, they are able to receive them without the original payer having to pay any fees for that transaction, since I run for free. So this is basically my unique selling proposition: is if you buy inbound from me, you can receive sats from anybody else who's connected to me for free.
So the network effects with this are really big. Like, I assume that the people who get into this earliest and craft, Metcalfe's law, like craft the biggest network, are going to be keystone nodes, like for a long ass time, right? It's like once the king is there, it's very hard to dethrone them because of network effects. Would that be a accurate assumption?
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I did what I did. I knew with the state of the network we're in right now, you want to grow very fast, because otherwise you're just small. And once you've been very big, like big nodes like async, they're never going to go away. They can charge huge fees because everybody connects to them anyway.
Right. The network they've created is very robust. So you're paying for the network
exactly.
size, not necessarily just for opening up a channel.
Yes.
So what is the Amboss? This is kind of a side question, but maybe related to sort of the idea of running a Lightning node. What is Amboss? And recently they came out with Magma. So can you, to someone who knows nothing about this and is literally just straight up Lightning noob, understands Bitcoin, but Lightning noob, aka me.
Yeah.
What is Amboss? What problem does it solve? And what is Magma? And why are they useful tools? I don't know if you use them, but if you do, like what problems do they solve?
Yeah, well, Amboss itself is a website where they basically list every Lightning node there is, all the channels that are existing between those nodes. They have certain metrics about how well connected these nodes are, how few hops it takes to reach the network, et cetera, et cetera. This is basically like if you want to run a routing node, Amboss is the tool to go to.
Okay, so it's like a directory of nodes where you can shop for people who you might open a channel with.
Exactly, and you can see who they have channels with. You can see who they had channels with. So it's a really great resource. I spent a ton of time on my day on Amboss. So it's like the tool. They recently, I think they published it yesterday, right? So that's really new. It came out with a tool where you can basically offer to sell inbound. Basically, what I do
and this is
for
Magma,
everybody,
right?
And this is Magma. They had it in closed beta a couple of days, so like a week or so. I was luckily part of that beta, so I got to test drive it. Cool. And it's well thought out, and it works really good. So basically, the person that offers to open the channel advertises their offer. They say, I'm willing to open a 1 or 2 million sat channel to anybody that pays for it. It's going to cost, for me, it's going to cost 8,000 sats to do that. And the advertisement sits there and waits for somebody to pick it up. And then the buyer basically says, okay, I want that channel. Then the seller gets an info, somebody wants to buy a channel. Do you agree to open a channel to that person? Then you can say yes. And then it's basically the whole flow of the back and forth that needs to happen in order to coordinate it is being done by them. And it's great experience, especially if you don't want to, because up until now, all I did was have people chat me up on Twitter or Telegram, which is fun, but it's very manual, and it's
not systematized.
No, and luckily I don't have to pay myself for my time, because otherwise it would be
you'd be
really
broke.
not possible.
Yeah. So it sounds like Magma's literally building a market, right? It's like making a market for selling and buying channel like for liquidity. And I have these, you posted a picture. It looked like a screenshot of sort of what an ad would look like on Magma, and it said size of the channel. So that one's pretty straightforward. Base fee, which I guess is like a one-time payment someone pays for that channel to be opened, and I'm assuming that covers part of your on-chain cost to open up that channel. Is that correct?
Yeah, the way they constructed the fee scheme is basically very, very closely how I did it. It's like you pay a fixed base fee for the channel, no matter the size. So, and that for me, that was always 3,000 sats, because that's basically, in case the channel gets force closed, I'll have to pay for the force closure. And if that happens, I want to have at least 3,000 sats to cover that, which in some cases it doesn't, but roundabout that's what it is for. And then you basically charge an additional proportional fee depending on the size. So back
And would that be
then,
the fee rate? Because what I saw was size of the channel, base fee, fee rate, and then APR. So I'd
yeah,
love, is the fee rate
yeah,
the proportional fee
yeah,
based on the channel
yeah.
size?
Yeah, it is, and it's a little bit confusing because you also have base fee and fee rate for the fees that you're gonna charge when the channel is open for forwarding payments. So that's a bit redundant, and it means two different things. But that's how they decided to go. So yeah, that's basically what it is. You pay a proportionate part for the opening the channel and a fixed part.
Okay. And then the APR, what is that? You know, like that's an interest rate, it looks like.
Yeah,
What would that be applied to? Like, what's the context with that?
that's basically what the annual percentage rate is. Basically, the interest rate on the capital deployed. What they do is they basically multiply the guaranteed channel duration, which for my channels is 90 days. So they basically divide the year by that time. So if I commit to keeping the channel open 90 days, I can use my liquidity 4 times a year, basically. Because if I keep it open 3 months, I can open 4 of those channels with the same money, basically, because I close it and reopen again. And that's how they arrive at that annual interest rate, basically.
And you basically get to choose that, correct? Like you enter that when you create
Yeah.
a listing in Magma. Okay, interesting. So if you keep a channel open for 90 days, now if someone force closes, do you basically just get paid the interest leading like for the period that has elapsed? Yeah.
No, basically you get paid upfront. So the buyer pays for the channel upfront, and if the channel gets closed for whatever reason, there is a quote reputation hit, which is really hard to qualify because if you run a node such as mine, I have forced closes all the time because that's just something that happens if you route a lot. And if you route a lot and have a lot of channels, I see force closes all the time, like a couple of force closes a week. So it's unavoidable that this is going to happen. So I don't know how they want to mitigate that, or if the channel gets mutually closed. Carsten Otto, who runs another huge and very professionally run routing node, he actually bought one Bitcoin channel from me during that closed beta. And after I opened the channel to him, the liquidity moved his way fairly quickly. The channel saw a whole bunch of routing, but the liquidity moved over to his end and basically just moved within the last 10 million Satoshi, basically, back and forth. The channel routed, I think, 6 times its capacity in the couple of days it was open, but the liquidity was all in his end. So for him, it was just the liquidity hawk. We could, and that's actually what we did. We closed the channel. He got the funds on chain, so he has a Bitcoin that he can now deploy to other ends. And we opened a smaller channel, which sees the same amount of movement as the big channel. So it's not necessary for us to have such a big channel between us, because we have such good back and forth in between our nodes. We don't have to have such a huge channel.
Right. So you don't need you don't need, like, the velocity is so high and in a balanced way that you don't necessarily need a massive amount of sats. You just need a channel with sufficient sats to facilitate that. That's very interesting. So I'd like to zoom out and just get your kind of, you know, if we go to the 10,000 mile view, get your thoughts on how fast, like, what is your impression of the speed of evolution of Lightning, like even from a year ago? Because it seems like 1 year in Bitcoin years is like freaking 7 years in Earth years. So, you know, what's your take or your thoughts on the speed at which Lightning is, the network's growing, the speed at which the user interface of the technology is improving, And, you know, if 0% is the day Lightning came out, and only the most hardcore people will use it, versus 100% is where, like, my mom can do 3 swipes and open a channel with me and have it be very straightforward. Where on that continuum? So number one is, what's your take on how fast this is evolving? And number two, where on that continuum from 0 to 100% do you put us right now? I'd love to know your thoughts.
Yeah. The speed at which everything is evolving and at which the ecosystem is growing right now is crazy, like mind-blowingly crazy. Nice. The growth of the network alone is incredible. It's like ever since I've started running the node, which is like 9 months ago, on the Ambos page they show you how much the network grew the past week. And it's never been less than 2 or 3% a week. Wow. So it's like, and right now we're at 6% capacity increase over the last 7 days. So it's
that's insane. When you look at that from a compounding standpoint, that's absolutely insane.
Yeah, and that's like literally crazy.
Now, how do they calculate, out of curiosity, how do they calculate that growth? Is it number of nodes on the network or capacity of Bitcoin on the network, or a mixture of both?
Capacity. So basically, they have 3 numbers. They have, the first number is the public liquidity inside the network. That grew by 6% last week.
Okay.
The amount of channels between the nodes, that grew by 4% last week. And the amount of nodes overall, that grew by 2% last week, which is still crazy.
Interesting. And that shows you the exponential nature, right? Where you get 2% more nodes yields 4% more paths, right? Like the exponential, like 2 times 2, basically.
No, and that's that's not the paths. That's just the amount of channels. So it's channels, not the paths. So the paths is even
would be even crazier. Cool.
Yeah. Awesome.
And then, and I assume, you know, things like Amboss and Magma, these are big improvements in the product array, like the applications that are being created to facilitate Lightning expanding, being easier to use, having better interfaces for people who are running Lightning nodes to take it more seriously, right? Like I heard you on a previous podcast talk about this whole idea that hobby routing or running a hobby Lightning node is not going to be, like, you have to basically make a distinction. Am I going to do a hobby node just for fun, or am I going to professionalize the way I'm doing this? Like you said, spend a shitload more energy and explore where this goes in terms of the profitability, right? Because the notion that you can make interest on your Bitcoin by essentially collecting fees on deploying that capital through the Lightning network. I mean, it's not necessarily like a turnkey thing where you can just do it right away. But, you know, I assume that, you know, the bigger this gets, the more efficient you have to be. It's like it'll approach its marginal cost to do. And I guess the marginal cost in that case would be the energy, but also having the capital. But what are your thoughts on this idea that instead of giving someone your Bitcoin, them paying you interest and hoping to get it back, right? Taking on that counterparty risk. Essentially, the investment is really to understand how to run a Lightning node and maybe in the equipment to do that. But do you see a future where people in the, let's say, the top 1% of Lightning nodes can professionalize and make a real meaningful income from doing this if they take it very seriously? Do you foresee that as a thing?
Yeah, I can see that happening. It's not right now because it's just the network is not that big yet. If you compare the biggest Lightning nodes with biggest banks in the world, it's like,
it's nothing right now.
It's nothing. But I can see the network growing, and I've never even thought about giving away Bitcoin in order to earn interest on them, because I just always considered the risk of me losing the coins that I rented out to be not reflecting the interest that I would get. So if somebody offered me, I don't know, 5% interest on me giving them Bitcoin, I would have to say no, because it's just the
Trade-off's not worth
likelihood
it.
of them not returning the money is in a year is not 20 to 1. I'd argue it's way higher than 20 to 1, them
Right.
not returning the money. So
Do you see that changing?
yeah,
In your opinion, do you think that whether it's institutions or federations or certain models, do you think those will be put in place maybe in the next decade where you could potentially revisit the trade-off and maybe see a lower risk profile of lending your Bitcoin for interest? Like, do you think that'll ever be a thing, or do you think it just doesn't align with the Bitcoin ethos where people need to take responsibility and essentially there's no such thing as a free lunch, right? And the price you pay for that 5% is, even if it's a 1% probability of losing your Bitcoin, like that could be an expensive price.
Yeah, yeah, and that's basically. I don't think I'm not sure if that's ever going to change. At least not while we see these crazy price increases or the potential for crazy price increases. Because if I rent out Bitcoin at the current price level and the price 10x's, and that person did something with those coins that was not holding them,
right?
They're probably not going to be able to give me back my Bitcoin, because they basically only have 10% of them, the ability to get 10% of them back. Even if they doubled their money, they can only get 20% of my Bitcoin back. So
right.
As long as we don't have a stable price, which I don't see us having for a while, it doesn't make a lot of sense unless you do something Bitcoin native with the funds, like deploying them on a Lightning routing node, where you basically use the Bitcoin as they are and use them to route. I can see that becoming professionalized, especially if more Bitcoin wants to be deployed in the network by people who don't want to do it themselves. So maybe there will be models where you get node operators operating a Lightning node with your funds in such a way that they can only open channels and close channels and whatever, but not use the funds in any other way. So that they can steal the funds, but they can open and close channels. Something like that may be evolving over the next couple of years.
So it's almost like a Lightning service provider, like a company that would provide Lightning liquidity, make a little percentage, would make a percentage of the fees, and create sort of safety constraints to accept Bitcoin, deploy that capital in such a way that they can't steal it, and they make a small percentage because their marginal cost to do it is low. That makes a lot of sense.
But there's nothing in the works, but this is something that I can envision happening.
Right. Like the incentives point to that potentially being on the map in future.
Yeah. Because right now, every Lightning operator is using their own funds. I don't know of any operator that has borrowed Bitcoin in order to run a node.
Right. Although potentially exchanges are using other people's, custodial exchanges might be using other people's Bitcoin.
Yeah, they are, of course.
Yeah. In terms of the second part of that question, 0% being the very start, 100% being like so easy, like email. I like to look at email as like a mental model of evolution of technology, where at the start you had to literally know how to insert command line, like in the very early days of email, before email was even a term that was in our cultural lingo. And then today, my mom can log in, swipe on her iPad, and an email gets shot to someone. To me, the idea of sending an informational message to anyone on earth is actually what sending a Bitcoin payment is, right? You're sending an informational message. The interface, obviously, we're still very early days with Bitcoin, and especially early days with Lightning. So where do you see us being on that continuum of 0 to 100%? So I can get a mental model of someone who understands Lightning. Like, what's your take on that?
Like the first graphical user interface for email, like the very first.
Okay, so we're early as hell.
Yeah, really early.
Amazing. That's exciting, because even, to me, Lightning is still this ephemeral thing that like, I feel like I'm never, even with Bitcoin, I feel like I never actually I understand it more as time goes on, but I still feel like I know so little. And I don't see that going away. But the fact that I can at least wrap my head around the concept of payment channels, the concept of Lightning being a second layer that solves the medium of exchange problem. And just the fact alone that we have a nation state that is essentially a sandbox for full commitment experimentation with Lightning as a
Yeah,
as a as a
crazy.
countrywide layer, like that's insane. That's a huge experiment ground for any company working on Lightning. And to
Yes.
me, that is a significant element in the evolution of this.
If I had to bet, I would have lost a lot of money regarding nation state adoption. I would have never, ever, ever thought that this 2022 was going to be the year, like
Yeah.
13
Yeah.
years after the invention, nation state adoption. It's crazy. Like El Salvador is, and now the Central African Republic,
Yeah.
two, by the looks of it.
I
So
think
yeah,
I
it's crazy.
I foresee, I don't know. I think 2022 is going to be a big year, I mean, I say that about every year, but just the vibe that I got at the Bitcoin conference and the sort of like whispers that I'm hearing about, okay, well, what if, there's always these what ifs, but like, what if the next announcement that was legitimate wasn't that a single nation adopted it, was that a conglomerate of nations agreed to adopt it together because strength in numbers, like the first one out of the gate takes the most hits, right? Like El Salvador, it literally stands
Yeah,
for the savior. And I don't know, that's a weird coincidence because like they're doing the scariest move by being the first movers. They're going to take the most hits, receive the most attacks. But I think the whole notion that, okay, well, let's learn from this. And other countries now have a much lower barrier because someone's already done it. And the idea that a group could do
yeah.
it together to have massive strength in terms of trade with each other, but also just strength in numbers. Like I'm excited to hear what happens in the next couple of years because I think the barrier to entry or the level of fear of embarking on this is now way lower because someone's done it.
It is. It is. It definitely. Especially if the stories I read today are turning out to be true and they really adopt Bitcoin as basically legal tender. A second country doing it, that's huge. I don't know if it's true, but
Yeah.
if it was, the dominoes are falling.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, you know, the whole Twitter thing, I think now we're going to be able to get a much better truth signal in Twitter without, hopefully the manipulation gets removed and actually truth can puncture through all the noise. So I'm curious to hopefully use that as a better platform for truth if Elon actually holds true to what he's saying he's going to do.
Yeah. It'll be
We got 10
interesting
minutes
too.
left.
Yeah.
I want to honor your time. I'd love to hear your take on, okay, right now I'm using Raspberry Pi and Umbrel, like the most basic of basic setups. Where does one go next if they want to, like what I'm thinking of is buying a laptop and running a note because I always thought like you had to have the standalone computer, and then I saw you posted you're using like a ThinkPad X1
Yeah.
laptop, which is a pretty beefy piece of gear. But this whole notion that a node can be run on a laptop completely changed things. So my next move, and I'd love to hear your advice on whether this is appropriate or not, is go to a laptop and be able to connect my node to Zeus LN wallet because I want to be able to get notifications of incoming sats from our podcast. Can't currently do that. Where does someone go next from running a Raspberry Pi and Umbrel? Like what is, like hardware and software recommendations? Love to hear your thoughts.
If you basically at some point you have to decide whether you want to run it at home or in your office or somewhere physically accessible to you, or if you just want to go the VPS like the rented computer way, just host it somewhere else, have it be outside and run there. They both have pros and cons. Running it on a VPS like DigitalOcean or something makes it very fast and scalable because all you need to do is click a couple of buttons on a website and boom, you have more space, more CPU power, more RAM, whatever. But it's well, you host it with somebody else. Comes with a bunch of risks regarding
Yeah.
that. It also you need to pay for that hosting somehow, so it gets a lot less anonymized. Are you user? Before I used the laptop, I used the old desktop PC that I had just sitting around. Lightning is actually very, very lightweight, especially CLN. It doesn't cost much computing power to run. especially even manual. So that's where you kind of decide which way you want to go. I went with the laptop because if there is a electricity outage, the laptop has its own battery, so it's gonna switch to battery power right away, and I don't have to worry about that aspect of it at all.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I have a desktop that I could do it on. I never even thought of that. And I'm not doing it from a professional standpoint. It's more just, as a Bitcoiner and someone who basically works full time orange pilling, I think it's my duty to sort of
Yeah.
constantly push my boundaries out in terms of my understanding. Even if I feel like a dummy, it's completely overwhelmed with information. It's like, that's the process, right? It's like, you're always going to feel like you know nothing, but if you're knowing more, then you're going in the right direction. So,
I knew nothing when I started the notes, so I just went with it. I have technical experience, so I was able to set up a Docker setup because I just know about Docker.
What is Docker for someone who doesn't know?
Umbrel is based on a Dockerized setup. Docker is a container platform where you basically run every application inside container, which makes it very easily manageable. This is basically what Umbrel does. Everything is inside its own Docker container. And my node as well. I have a database container, the Lightning container, and the Bitcoin container all talking to each other.
Amazing. And so do you still use Umbrel as like the base platform?
No. It's a hand woven Docker setup that I have.
Cool. All right. I guess if you're a pro, that's what you you have a pro grade setup.
That's what you have to do.
There you go. So I guess kind of wrapping things up. I mean, thank you, ZFR, for your time. I think I always enjoy going back and listening to these and kind of like soaking in a little bit more each time. If there's a couple things, like if a Bitcoiner wants to get more into Lightning and you had a couple nuggets of wisdom to give them about the path forward and maybe some of the lessons you learned, and if you could have told if you could have taught yourself some lessons, a year ago when you were just getting into this, what would those lessons be? And is there any words of wisdom you can give to plebs who, maybe look at Lightning as a big obstacle, like it's intimidating? Anything you can give them in terms of reducing the intimidation or reasons why looking into Lightning would be worth it?
Yeah. First word of advice: don't expect to make money anytime soon. Be curious. Start with something easy. There's no shame in just setting up an Umbrel and running it and getting your feet wet, opening a bunch of channels, trying things out, and then see where it takes you. Because if you wanted to do it hardcore, you never get started, basically.
Right.
So just
start small.
Go with it and do it. Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah, I think that's that's valid advice for anyone in Bitcoin, regardless of what you're starting to look into. And ZFR, thanks again for joining us at the Stoa today. To everyone listening, thanks for being here. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you did, you can support the project by heading to bitcoinstoa.com and sending some sats to the QR code on the homepage. We're going to work eventually to get Lightning embedded there. We don't right now. It's only main chain, but I think this conversation stimulated me to maybe look a little bit more into Lightning, figure out how to get more familiar with the tech. ZFR, thanks for your time. And to everyone listening, we'll catch you next time.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Bye.